Alrighty, let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. It's good to, I guess, virtually see you all. I can't see you, but you can see me. So that will be the trade-off for today. My name is Minwoo, or you can call me Min. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm the customer success lead here at Checkbox. And as part of my role, I get to get my hands on the product, work with it, work with you guys on how to apply that to your use cases. So my goal for today's session is really to get you across the massive release that we just had, version 1.23 with the solution update, and hopefully get you a bit more familiar with all the different features that were introduced. I know there were quite a number of new features. So as part of this webinar, I have Aditi, who's also Customer Success Manager here from Checkbox, in the chat. So if you have any questions, instead of using the Q&A button, please do use the chat box. Please feel free to ask any questions in that chat box. Aditi's just said, hi, everybody. And we'll do our best to answer all your questions. If we don't get around to answering a question this webinar, then we will endeavor to actually send a follow-up email. We will send a recording out. We'll actually answer your questions as part of that follow-up email as well. So please go ahead and shoot away. Aditi will be answering on the go. But with that said, let's dive into it. So with the big change, you would have noticed on our Checkbox platform, we introduced a number of different features. And I just want to pull that up for you. So there were 5 new features released as part of our new solutions release. And they are on your screen in front of you. So I'll quickly go through them, give a short summary on what they are and why we've introduced them. So the first one to note here is the solutions release. So for those of you who are quite familiar with the building portion of our platform, it would have said apps in the top of your screen before. That has not changed and has become solutions. So solutions is a more holistic approach to how we build our apps now on Checkbox. And it's primarily because for those of you who have built, you would have noticed that the apps previously required, just for you to put together the flow of your app. And that would be sort of your software there, but you would need to wait till you got to the project team stage for you to design things like dashboards and things like scheduled tasks. And so it's a little bit of a disconnected journey when it comes to presenting a holistic software. Now with the solutions release, you can now create a package, an app that is both the flow, but also includes those additional things that make up your software, including widgets and dashboards and scheduled tasks. And so that's all been pulled forward to your building phase. So you don't have to worry about waiting to your project team phase to set that all up. The other big thing to note for the solutions release is the inclusion of sort of inter-app communication. So this is the direction that our product is going, which is very exciting. Before you sort of had your app, which sat by itself, it didn't really do anything, didn't really communicate with any other app. But now with the exciting new releases that you see on your screen, you will be able to actually communicate with different apps. And we have a new app type, which you'll be able to interact with. Another way to think about it is solutions is the whole package of software, including the app, dashboards, and all the goodies around the app itself, and apps will still exist as a concept, which is just the App Studio. Now, the second feature we released was multi-app solutions. So obviously to enable inter-app communication, we now have the ability for you to have multiple apps in your solutions. The third one is data apps. We now have an app type that allows you to store information on Checkbox and persistently refer to it, as well as update this data source, which is awesome, and you can refer to that, and I'll show you how you do that in Checkbox. Obviously, to do that in a flow app, we call it, if you wanted to refer to some information inside your data app, you would need a field to do it. So our fourth new feature is the lookup field, which you can find inside your form, and that will give you the ability to search your data app or apps. And the last concept, which is really exciting for us, is the testing team concept. So the ability for you to actually take your whole solution, and instead of creating, what we did before, we had a testing team and a live team, and you had to recreate your dashboards from a test project team and a live project team. We cater that for you as part of the product. So you can have a testing team that enables you to see things as they would be if they were in a live environment, including all the dashboards. And then when you're ready to actually put that into a live environment, it's literally something like 2 clicks. So it's very straightforward. Now, I want to quickly, before I jump onto the platform, I want to note the obvious asterisks and yellow coloring that you have on your screen there. So multi-app solutions, data apps, lookup field, and testing teams are all premium features. So if you don't see that on your screen there, feel free to reach out to your customer success manager or account manager. It's probably because you don't have premium features enabled. And for those of you who do have it on your Checkbox platform, it's because you obviously have premium features. It is free in 2021 for customers who already have premium features. So that's on us. So that's pretty cool. All right. A lot of talking on a PowerPoint slide. I'm sure you guys are excited to see the actual products themselves. So let me reshare my screen here and hopefully jump into the Checkbox platform. Fantastic. And I'm hoping that you guys can see my screen there. I'm going to assume if Aditi or no one else doesn't say anything that you guys are seeing my Checkbox platform. So what you're seeing on your screen now is the solution landing page. You will notice here from the get-go that there are some different terminologies. So at the top, you've got project teams and solutions. I want to first talk about solutions because there's a lot to unpack here and it affects all of our customers. So first things first, the way you create solutions in Checkbox was the same as you did in apps. You go to the solutions menu, you click on create new solution, and you have the option to specify a name, a version, and a description. You can also import a solution if your friend or colleague has given you a solution import code, but just note that there are still app export codes, which means that you cannot take an app code and put it into a solution for obvious reasons. So just keep that in mind. There are two different types of app export and solution export codes now. Now, when you do create your solution, this is the screen that you will be greeted by. And there's a lot going on here. So I want to kind of sequentially go through all the different aspects of what you're seeing on your screen right now. So first things first, your apps will appear on the left-hand side under the apps menu. And if you've got one app, you would have migrated, when the migration happened with the new release, you would have seen your app automatically be included here under the apps menu. Now, this is a little bit different to how it was before. We had sort of the home page for the app, and you also had versions and publishing. And the question you're probably asking is, Minwoo, how do I access my studio? Well, all you need to do is you need to click on the app that you want to access the studio for. And as part of the drop-down menu that appears, you do have the option then there to click on App Studio, and that will take you right in there. And so that user journey is a slight change from what it was before. Nothing really has changed in terms of the studio itself. Now, keep in mind, for those of you who access through versions and publishing, you won't be able to access specific apps through this window just yet. And it's probably worth noting here that versions and publishing is a new concept for the solution. Now, keep in mind, because you can have multiple apps in the solution, you can almost think of versions and publishing as a snapshot of your solution at that point in time. In fact, we have now this drop-down menu at the top that enables you to very quickly toggle between the versions that you had created, and in particular, emphasizing the ability to go back to read-only copies of your solution, as well as editable or testing versions, and even published versions of your solution. So don't go to versions and publishing. If you want to go to your App Studio, please click on the app on the left-hand side, followed by the App Studio button. Now, as soon as you click on your app on the left-hand side, you will notice a couple of different options here. The first thing that you'll note is that this kind of categorization, it says Flow App, and that's because there are two types of apps now, Flow App and Data App. Spoiler alert, I will cover that towards the end. And notice we now have sort of the Export App button here, which again, as I shared earlier, enables you to import apps into specific solutions. So best practice, if you want to share your apps and just the app itself, just the build, export the app. If you want to share the solution, including all the dashboards and things like that, I suggest you export the solution code. Now, some other things here that you'll notice here is access type. So for those of you who built on Checkbox before, you would have noticed that the project team, remember that option when you created your project team, you had internal and external project team, and you had to kind of make that choice right up front. And it was like, oh, I don't know if I want to commit to one choice or the other. What if I want to change my mind? Well, that option is now made so much easier for you because you can change that now at the solution level. So it's as easy as toggling between internal and external access. So maybe you start internal, find out that it's, perhaps your app needs to be accessed by someone outside your organization. It would be as easy as toggling to external access. Cool. The next thing to note is you can build in widgets from the get-go. So again, making sure that you expose your variables inside your app. you have the options to now create your widgets here in Checkbox, and I will show you that in a second. But notice here, I can't actually create a widget. And the reason for that is under the new versions and publishing method, I can only create widgets for editable copies of my solution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the versions and publishing menu here. I'm going to create a new version of my total solution, which is going to take a snapshot of all my apps. I'm going to create that version. Takes a second, but it gets done. I'll go back to the apps, which is self-service NDA. I'll click on widgets and I can create my widget here. Pretty cool. So you can do that widget design right from the get-go. You don't need to wait for the project team. And I will kind of note that you can still create custom dashboards or custom widgets in your project team. So don't worry about needing to know exactly what data you need up front in your solution. That pressure is not on you. It's only there if you know exactly what you want to see. The project teams will also have the option to create their own widgets and dashboard. Now, I do refer to widgets and dashboard a lot. I'm assuming that you guys know what that is, but in the interest of sort of sharing the difference, widgets are the specific charts that you see here. Dashboards are the culmination of the different widgets. So many widgets make a dashboard. Cool. The other thing to note is obviously the scheduled tasks that I mentioned before. So previously that was in the project team level. It's now been pulled all the way up front at your design level. All right, moving on to some other aspects. I'm going to skip over the data wrap, which I'll get to in a second. So the next one is solution authors. Now, if you remember back to the old checkbox, I'm going to refer to it as the old checkbox, the way that authorship worked was that it was done at an account level. So if you created an app, it was either everyone has access to your app or I mean, there was a permission setting called edit all apps, or there was edit own apps. But now with the solution author design, you can actually restrict the people who have access to your solution and have access to the underlying IP of your solution. So this is particularly interesting for those of you who work in spaces where particularly things like HR, where the contents of your app might be confidential or might be sensitive. You might only want specific people to be part of your solution and be able to edit your solution. So you have the option now to add authors. And so it's a bottom-up approach. You do need to invite people in. And on average, we find that it's between 2 and 5 people building on one, what we used to call app, but now solution anyway. So this will make it a lot easier for you to sort of safeguard your solution. Cool, you have general settings here, that hasn't changed, so that's all good. Now, other thing to note is if you delete your solutions, it will be permanently deleted. So be very careful about deleting. I think previously apps were able to be deactivated. They, just kind of were deactivated, but now it's going to get permanently deleted. So just watch out. Keep that in mind. Alrighty. So next part is the multi-app solutions. So I mentioned before that you have the option to create a suite of apps inside your solution. And you might be wondering, when would you want to do that? Well, for instance, I might create an in-house legal suite that has a legal intake and triage app, and also has a NDA generator app, and also has a delegation of authority workflow app. And so these 3 apps would work together and may even refer to data from one another. And I would include that as part of a multi-app solution called the in-house legal solution. So how do I add apps into your solution? Well, the first prerequisite, which caught me off guard when I saw this new release, is you will need to be in an editable version of your app. So if you don't see this little plus icon next to apps, it's because you're probably in a version of your solution that is not editable. Again, remember, go to versions and publishing and create a new version. Then when you come back, if you still don't see it, it's probably because you're not a solution author. So that's the other thing I should have noted. So make sure you're a solution author. But you do have the option to click on app here. And again, you have the option between Flow app, which is the traditional apps that we made before, and the data app. All right. So now we've reached the exciting new type of app, and I cannot wait to share this with you. So data apps, as I mentioned before, act like a database in Checkbox. So when you create a data app, and I've already done this in the interest of time, I'll go over here. You'll see a new data app icon here. You'll see certain kind of aspects here. Have widgets and schedule tasks as well. But let me go into the form. So the reason why it's form is there's no studio for a data app. It's constructed as though it is a database. So it looks like a form, feels like a form, And that's just how you sort of input the elements. But think of each of these panels as columns or items that you want to collect inside your data app. So for instance, in this particular case, I've created an example data app called vendor details. Now, this paragraph is just for me as the builder, but what I've gone and done is clicked and dragged in a text input field and called it vendor name and given it a variable name. Done the same for ABN and done this. I've done the same for state. Now, what this will mean is when I actually publish this to what I call the testing team, I'll be shown a form, which I'll show you later, which I can input information and it will store that and I can refer to that information. So if the vendor name is Checkbox, ABN is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't know what our ABN is, and then state New South Wales, in another flow app, I can actually refer to that data, and I will show you that in a second. Now, for those of you who are creating data apps, I want to make it super clear that it is important to expose variable for list views and charts as part of your data app. Again, emphasis here is if you pull in a panel, make sure you do, first of all, as best practice, rename your variable names, but also expose variables for list views and charts. Otherwise, it won't be accessible by other apps. And you will need to do this for each of the fields. Cool. So that's the data app side. What about referring to that data app inside your flow apps? Well, good question. Well, I'm just talking to myself here, so it's a good question for myself. So if you go into your forms now, this is the old NDA demo that a lot of you guys have seen before. There is a new field here called the Lookup field, and the Lookup field enables flow apps to look at data from data apps. So I've already set one up here. It's called Lookup 235. And when you click and drag it in, there are a couple of different options, and I'll carefully walk through this with you. So the first one is just a question field, that's fine, but this bottom part is really the most important part. So the first thing that you'll need to note is which app do you want to look up data from for this lookup field? Because effectively how it's going to work is I'm going to look up a name like Apple, and then it's going to look up that name Apple in a different app. So I've got a vendor register, which is a data app. I've clicked that and selected that as my app source. I then need to choose a key variable in source app. So this is interesting. You do need to select a type of variable you want to use to search in the data app. So if it's going to be the company name and you expect the user to choose a name, then you want to indicate name. And then at the bottom, what you want to do is you want to say, okay, if I search the company name, what information do I need to pull from the data app? First things first, you do need to indicate the name as a source of information to pull from your source app. So if you say, I'm going to search based on the name, then yes, you need to map between the form and the source app as the name. I've also pulled in ABN and the state. If you remember, we had those as variables inside our data app. Cool. And that's pretty much it. Cool. So let me show you what that looks like, because a lot of that was very conceptual. So let me hop back into the solution. And the way that I'm going to show you how this works is using our 5th new feature, which is the test project team. So for those of you who have premium features enabled, you'll see this tab here at the top, which is called test this version. And when I click on test this version, here's what's going to happen. I would click on yes, and it's going to create what we call a testing team. It's a type of project team that acts almost like a live project team, but doesn't necessarily need to be shown to anyone. And in fact, it does all the things that you would expect a project team to do, including having team members, having my apps here on the left, and it can even show me what the dashboards will look like if it were to be deployed to a live environment. Now, let's start with the data app, because that's probably the most interesting. In the data app, the way to load in data is in 2 ways. The first way is you can manually click in new assessment, and you can see the form here, enter that information. So it might say here, Woolworths, ABN 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the state is, let's go with Western Australia, why not? And when I click on save, that information will be stored inside my data app. So that's a new row. And in fact, if I head back to the assessment list here in the top left-hand corner, I will see all the entries that I've put in. You can see I'm a big Apple fan here. I've gone and put in all these rows of information inside my data app. And so I can refer to this information in my flow app at any point. I can in fact go in and edit this information if I would like, if I need to update the ABN, etc. Now it's important to note here that each assessment is one row. So if you click on save, it will override the old information. So the obvious question is, can you bulk import that information and not have to do it row by row? The answer is yes. You have the download CSV, you have the upload CSV, you have the uploads, here we go, import and export CSV option. On the left-hand side, click import and export that data in relation to those columns. So for my app, there was name, ABN, and state. Upload that as a CSV and you'll get a very full vendor list. All right, cool. What about the flow app side? Let me show you. I'm going to go to self-service NDA. I'm going to click on new NDA and let's put a timestamp here, 12:05/7. You can see I've made quite a number of different apps. So start that. Cool. So you can see it says test assessment for this time. And I click on start. Now remember that this first field here is the lookup field. So I'm going to click on there. And I put in a number of different sort of Apple vendors. Imagine, for instance, I work with a lot of companies that for some reason have Apple in their name. So when I type in Apple, it's going to search that the details inside my data app, and it's going to pull up all that information into a drop-down list. So if I choose Apple and Nugget, which is a legitimate company, turns out, it's going to pre-populate all the information below. And notice there, done. If I go ahead and go back to that list, change that, try again, do, let's say, Adam's Apple, the information once again will change. And so you can see this interaction between flow apps and data apps, where what you search for in the flow app is automatically being pulled from the data app. And I think the other company that I put in just then was Woolworths. Yep, so if I do that, all that information I put in before, it gets pulled in. So this is particularly useful if you have sort of suppliers or managers or partners or individuals or entities in general that you know that people are going to constantly refer to. So it's helpful to have that on hand to be used so that you can refer to them at a later point and cut down a lot of the manual information input that people usually do as part of this process. That's kind of cool. Cool, back to NDAs. Now, the other thing to note here is you'll notice that the NDA solution that I have here has the custom dashboards already set up. See, I set this at a solution level. In fact, if I go back to the solution menu here, go to the dashboard. Oh, you can't see it because this is in testing mode. If I go ahead and create a new solution version just very quickly here for you, I'll show you that I had actually set up the dashboard at the solution level way ahead of time. So you can see here, I've gone and if I click here, set up all those dashboards for myself. And so when I published this to my test team, it was automatically shown. Now, you don't always need to click on test this version to access your testing, because sometimes you just don't want to publish things to your testing. You just want to refer to the testing you just created. Like in this case, I don't want to click on test team. It's a double up of what I had before. The way to access your test teams is to click on project team. There's now a new tab called live teams and test teams. So I click on test teams. And then when I go ahead and click on my particular solution, voila, the test team is all ready for me. And whenever I'm ready to publish it, I can go ahead and publish it and it will be a live app. Now, the question that I get asked often is, well, okay, what if the people in the project team need different dashboards to what I've set up in the solution? Great question. So the answer is it can be set up. And in fact, I don't think I can do it here in this particular testing team version, but when you deploy it out to the live version, I'm just going to go into here. This is another app that we had before. You'll notice the option to edit team dashboard. And so I, as a project team member, have the option to then create my own customized dashboards in the project team. And that would be helpful if you are building apps for another team in your organization that might not necessarily have the same dashboard or widget requirements as you had thought when you were designing the app itself. So it gives them that flexibility. So you can see here, there's solution dashboards that come with your solution, and there are custom dashboards that your project team members can set up. Now, on the note of project team members, we now have a more clean way to sort of manage the team members. I'm going to add myself to this particular team and give myself ownership. Am I already part of this team? Oh, I must already be part of this team. Well, yes, you can add yourself, and you have a team member, team owner, and team member permission levels. We're going to manage solution. You also have obviously the ability to have multiple solutions inside your project teams. So this is getting a little bit like Inception. You can have multiple apps in solutions, and multiple solutions inside your project teams. Cool. So let me see what else I can show you guys. Yes, that's right. So the other thing I needed to quickly show you, if I can access it, is the ability to segregate permissions. Let me just go to digital front door. Sorry, I'm probably a member of this team. Oh, team owner. Here we go. So for each of your solutions within your project teams, you have the option to set different permissions. Okay. So before it was something like view all, view own, and team administrator. Now we have clearer roles between team owner and team member. And so you have the options to create, edit, and view all NDAs, or in this case, assessments. You have the option to just create and edit your own NDAs and edit your own NDAs. Now, that option can be applied specifically to individuals, okay? And the more specific permission will prevail when it comes to permissions. So if I have create, edit, and view all NDAs and I want to change it for a specific individual, the more specific permission level will prevail over the default role permissions. Cool. Coming to the last few sort of changes here. So sit tight. The first one is in your solutions tab, there is a drop down called status, which will allow you to filter published and unpublished solutions. Very cool. Cool. And the second one is privacy. So privacy is now a concept that prevents, or I guess checks, when solutions are ready to be deployed to project teams. So you have two options, public and private. Private solutions will not be able to be deployed to project teams unless the solution author publishes it. Public solutions can be launched by anybody. So I think by default, you'd probably prefer it to be private. You wouldn't want people to be deploying your solution unless you wanted to give them permission to do so. If you're happy with that, go public. But if you want to make sure that everything is in checks and balances for your app, private means that only the solution owner and solution authors are able to deploy to project teams. Now, with this big emphasis on permissions, the last thing I want to show you is the changes to the role configuration. It's more pertinent to you guys at an administrative level, but with the changes, we now have solution level management and user management. And so with solutions, it allows you to either edit all solutions, publish solutions, or create new solutions. And obviously that permission you can change on your particular account, as well as managing all users and managing roles. So there is a sort of segregation layer there. I'm not sure if too many of you guys are involved at this administrative level, so please reach out to me if you have any questions about this. Happy to answer them. Now, that was a lot to take in, and we are coming very close to time. So what I'll do is, if you guys have any questions, please pop them in the chat. For those of you that need to run off, thank you so much for coming along to this webinar. It was really a pleasure to share this new feature release with you. Again, if you have any questions, I'm available, Aditi is available, your CSM and account managers are available. I'm going to hang back for a couple of minutes to just let all the questions flow through. We'll endeavor to answer them as we go. But with that said, thank you so much once again for coming along to today's webinar.